of Star Trek Picard. Of course, it's called Maps and Legends. This, of course, is the episode that you can watch on CBS All Access right now. This is going to be an interesting conversation. I know some general feelings that Eric had about it. I kind of still don't know how to feel about certain aspects of it. So I guess we'll start off with our general impressions of the episode. And I do want to mention, too, for those of you who are curious about Star Trek Picard, I don't know if it's still available, but if you don't have CBS All Access, they had actually made Star Trek Picard, the first episode, actually available to watch for free on YouTube. I don't know if it's still on YouTube as of when you're watching this episode or even tonight while we're live, but you could have, and you may possibly still be able to, go to YouTube and actually watch the first episode of Picard. I like the first episode better than the second episode, but we're gonna get into that here in a minute. But if you're curious how to actually watch Star Trek Picard, there was a way you could go watch on YouTube. I'm hoping you can still do that if you're curious about it.
Also on Apple, I believe Apple.
Oh, on Apple, okay.
The Apple Store also has the first episode of Picard for free now.
Well, there you go, and there's a lot of promotion that CBS All Access has put behind it. So I'm glad to see that they have at least the first episode available in different channels for people who do want to check it out and see if it's something they want to actually watch. I think the first episode for me is stronger than the second, so I think it's definitely worth checking out if you're curious about it.
I think it's odd they did. I think it's odd they didn't have it on the CBS broadcast network, because they did that with Discovery, and I found it very odd that they didn't do that. And we got a shout out from Orville Nation, PJ. Awesome, you're actually checking things out. Glad you stopped by. So he's just saying, hey guys, PJ is a big supporter of ours. I've been on his channel. That's how I met George. But he has great content. He doesn't just do Orville. He does stuff about Star Wars, Star Trek, all sorts of other good stuff on Orville Nation, and they're a big supporter of ours.
Cool. And so would you said PJ, because I've chatted with him. I think actually on his live stream on YouTube. So does it qualify for the contest? So I can plug it again, because it's really annoying. I like plugging it. So yeah, again, thank you for commenting and for commenting on this episode. You've been entered into a drawing to possibly win an original art sketch card. This is an art sketch card. This art is by me. This is from the official Cryptozoic trading card set, Superman the Legend. It's got the little hollow foil in there. That's how you know it's official. But this is official. This is not a print. This is original art on a card, and you have been entered into the drawing for this particular episode. And a reminder for everyone watching, you can't see it, but there's a live watch party that I started by accident trying to share this episode. So there are more people commenting than you're currently aware of. And whenever I go dark, it's because I am trying to see what's happening over there, and I don't want you to have to watch me scanning my phone. So when that happens, that's what I'm doing. But thanks again for commenting. Like I said, I've participated in a lot of the Orville Nation live streams when I was available to do it, and I quite enjoyed the conversation. I mentioned before, Eric, I got shut down on my crazy Space 1999 thing that I thought would actually be kind of fun. The lady shut me down real quick, but I still think it's a good idea.
I think it's a good idea too. So because that really hasn't been done. There's not a whole lot of Space 99.
Yeah, I think it'd be fun to give them an ending. I mean, there's that short fan film that supposedly is an ending, but I still think it's a good idea. I don't think it's worth dismissing. Because the shocking thing about it still is her opinion is that she's seen that done before, and I'm thinking, how many parody endings of Space 1999 have you seen? I haven't seen anyone revisit Space 1999. So
it looks
I think it's a good idea.
Looks like PJ agrees with you, because he says that I do too. So
yeah, he was nice enough to try and defend me.
Your wild, crazy notions.
Yeah, and sometimes my wild, crazy notions are fun ideas that they just should be immediately dismissed. But she was not a fan. Not a fan. That's all right. That's all good. But no, thanks for coming in and commenting and being part of the show. I quite enjoy Orville Nation when I get a chance to watch it and participate in it, and it's
There's
always lively
great
and fun.
content on Orville Nation.
Yeah,
Great
yeah,
content on Orville
worth checking
Nation,
out.
and he's been doing interviews. He has a great interview with Core Nemec from Parker Lewis and Stargate. He has a great one with Icheb. I always mess up his real name. I can't remember his real name, but Icheb. And he did one recently with, PJ, can you help me? What's your last one you did? The last interview you did, if you're still in the chat, it was the Martok, the Klingon Martok, the actor. He did an interview with him. There's great content on Orville Nation. Excellent content. And he said he'd love to have us on soon if you were up to it. And of course, we're up to it, PJ. We would love to be on it. I've been on your show before, and I've talked to Dave about it, and I think we would love to both be on sometime too. So, oh, there we go. Here's the name of the actor, JG
Hertzler.
Which I have a little story about him, but I'm not going to say it because it's not really that great a story. Because I met him in Star Trek Vegas, and the circumstances were less than ideal. But maybe someday I'll give you my Martog story.
Okay.
I don't like to be mean to people, so maybe he's having a bad day, but it happens.
Right. Yeah. No, yeah. I would definitely like to be on Orville Nation, and I would actually like to start doing. We talked about it before about actually working our way through the Orville in general, because I just recently finished season 2 on Hulu. And I really, really enjoyed it. I think that the Orville is such a quality show. Was kind of stunned by how good some of those episodes are. I mean, especially some of the later ones in season 2, absolutely stunned. And I loved all the stuff that they actually did with I can't remember the name of the character, but the little security officer who left the show. The way that they had her leave the show and the couple episodes they did with her were so great, where we actually went to her planet. And man, some of that music is great too. Orville's a quality show. If you're watching this and you haven't seen Orville, you got your subscription to Hulu, you definitely need to be checking out the Orville for sure. After you watch the episodes, head over to Orville Nation, be part of the community.
Yeah, it's a great community too. I have to say the Orville fans kind of blow away Star Trek and Star Wars fans, just in terms of their civility and positivity and all that kind of stuff. Because let's face it, there's a lot of toxic fandom right now in Star Wars and Star Trek. You know what I mean? But I don't see it nearly as much with the Orville. The Orville fans are usually a lot of fun to interact with.
Yeah, unless you bring up Space 1999.
Apparently, they don't like Space 1999.
They don't like that. They don't want to talk about Space 1999. I want to talk about Space 1999. Maybe that's just me. I want to talk about Justified too, but we're getting off topic. So before I get into actually talking about Star Trek Picard. So this is the second episode on CBS All Access, Star Trek Picard. This is Maps and Legends, which I believe is actually directed by the same lady who actually directed the first episode as well, which is interesting because I'd heard some comments and kind of some rumblings that they considered actually the first 3 episodes of this to almost be like a 3-hour pilot, that the first 3 episodes are kind of like essentially the pilot episode, even though they've broken them up into 3, that you should kind of consider these 3 episodes as being kind of one thing. And it does feel like
the premiere was the premiere, which remember we had Heather on from Starfleet Underground, and one of her panelists actually went to the premiere, actually attended the premiere,
right.
And they showed the first 3 episodes during the premiere. That they showed all 3 of them.
And I wonder how I'd felt about this episode if I could have immediately followed up with the 3rd episode, because I liked the first one a lot more than the second one. I'm not ready to jettison the series just yet. And I'm curious to see where they go with it. But there were kind of some shocking turn of events in this that I kind of knew was probably coming and was kind of hoping wasn't going to happen. And then it did. And I was kind of like, well, that's unfortunate. Because like I said, we just talking about the Picard Countdown comic, there's a lot of people that feel like the Romulans do when it comes to Starfleet. I almost wonder if, I'm sure it was a publishing timing error, but at the same point, I didn't like how it was kind of reinforced to hear that message delivered in a different way by someone else, because I like to believe in the hope and the possibility of something like Starfleet actually existing. People being able to pull themselves out of their mire and find the better them inside, and work together, to build a better community. So I think it's unfortunate that they don't seem to feel that way. That they feel like at the end of the day we're all going to be at each other's throats no matter what we do. Um, that was definitely the downer part of this episode for me. Um, so I guess I should start with initial impressions, and then we'll get into the spoilers. I kind of gave my initial impressions right there. I didn't like it as much as the first one. I didn't hate it. I'm not ready to jettison the series, but I found it disheartening, to see what's happening with Starfleet, and I found it a little sad, because now I think, like, I know Alex said on the last episode that he wanted to join Starfleet. He almost accidentally joined Space Force. After this episode, I might just soon join Space Force.
Yeah,
So
I can see that. I can totally see that.
yeah.
This episode I think is a downer. I think there's no other way to put it. I don't understand. It's hard for me to understand people that really like this episode. I thought the first episode was much better than this one. I think this one is very dreary and kind of depressing. It's not what I see as the vision of Gene Roddenberry in terms of that positive vision of the future. I'll really get into this in the deep dive. These characters act way too contemporary. They act way too human. There's not a whole lot of thought to what other cultures, even on Earth, are like. You know what I mean? In terms of, it seems like everybody in this show is an American. Which is really weird. I don't understand that. I don't understand the whole, like using words like hot, to describe somebody, or you don't feel like this is the future. You feel like this is like happening kind of like right now, except with better technology,
Yeah.
That's kind of the way that I feel. And what that does, I talked about this on our review of the previous episode, like when we had the scene with Dodge and her boyfriend, and they were saying things like dude and cool. And so early in the episode, it took me out of Star Trek for a while. Like, I didn't feel like I was watching Star Trek. I felt like I was just watching Friends, or
Right.
watching like Seinfeld or something. You know what I mean?
Right.
It takes me out of the world, and I hate that. I hate that when they take me out of the world, because for me, science fiction is absolutely about escapism. Science fiction is absolutely about escapism. So I want to be in that world. I always say this. I am a big lore guy. I am a big world building guy. That's what makes me like things like Star Wars and Star Trek, Battlestar Galactica, Buck Rogers. It's not just the episodes themselves or whatever it is that I see. It's the worlds that I can create in my own head based on certain principles and rules that are established on the show. And that for me is almost more fun than watching the show. It's just kind of thinking the different possibilities, or what this, what if that. But when you kind of throw all the rules out the door, you can't do that anymore, because you're not into that world anymore. You get sucked out. We have a comment from the chat. It says modern day lingo ruins it, and I agree. I think modern day lingo is destroying Star Trek, and I don't understand the reason for it. Yeah, he says it breaks the immersion, and I agree with you 100%, Bobby. It breaks the immersion because you are no longer in that world. You're sucked out of it, and I hate it. I absolutely hate it. Now, do I hate this episode? Hate's always a strong word, right? Man, I'm pretty close to hating this episode. I'm pretty close, I'm pretty close to hating this episode. I'm trying to think of, and as we talk into more of the deep dive and the spoilers and stuff like that, I think hopefully I can find something redeeming in it. But,
Right. Yeah, go ahead.
There's a comment from Marvel Nation, but I think he might be a little bit of a spoiler there.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm not sure if I quite understand the question. So
let's go ahead and finish our initial and then we can get into spoilers and then we'll bring it up and we can actually discuss it since we have some commenters. They might have something I might want to add to it that will actually make for an interesting discussion.
yeah, and I would like a little bit of elaboration, PJ, on your comment because I'm not sure I quite. Do you follow it? Are you reading it?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I quite understand the question or the point.
I think what he's no, you're good.
No, I actually, PJ, I want you to elaborate on your question because I'm not quite. I don't think I quite understand it.
I follow what he's saying, but I think
you do. Okay, all right.
We should wait to get into more spoilery kind of conversation. It's good. It's good. You're good. We're going to get into it here in just a second. So you're saying you're hoping you could find something in the episode maybe over time.
As we talk about it, I'm hoping something redeeming will come out.
There's some stuff I like about this episode, but just the downer aspects of it is just sort of like I said, I think as a middle act in a 3-part story, maybe I'd feel differently about it, but you by the time you reach the end of this episode, I'm personally so saddened by what's going on with Starfleet and essentially the Federation to one extent or another. And I do think your theory is right, Eric. I think that Picard is going to show us why we find the Federation in the state that it's in Discovery season 3.
Oh, it's clearly setting that up.
Yeah,
especially this episode. This episode basically tells you what happened. I mean, the rot is there. The rot. I mean, the rot is bad. I mean, there's huge rot in Starfleet right now. Corruption, incompetence. You know what I mean? Everything you can think of, bad, is happening with Starfleet right now. And we're going to get into that in the deep dive because I'm going to bring up specific points that really pissed me off.
But yeah, like I said, I'm into watch Picard. I'm one of those people. I did not hate Discovery. I felt like season 2 is better than season 1, and I would really love to see a Pike show. That's what I'd love to see, even if it's like a 2-hour TV movie or miniseries about CBS All Access. It makes sense to me to do that. No, like I said, I didn't hate this episode, but I just personally just found it to be a bit of a downer. I'm hoping there's some more interesting things in obviously the next episode. I'm hoping it'll redeem itself a little bit. So I think that's probably pretty good for our initial.
And I do want to point this one other thing out. There was a lot of interesting and good action scenes in the first episode. I don't think there was one in this one, was there? I don't think there was one interesting action sequence in this entire episode, was there?
I don't think that there's nothing and that's the point I want to bring up about this episode. It wasn't terribly memorable. I had a harder time.
Well, I just watched it before coming on. I watched it when it first came out. Boy, if we had done the review when I was first watching it, early Thursday morning.
You were not in a good mood.
Oh man, I would be. This show would just be expletives, and you know what I mean. It wouldn't even be a show, But watching it again, it kind of softened the blow, and I wasn't as upset, as when the first time I watched it. But you're right. I just watched it, and I can't remember. But the thing is, there's obviously not any memorable action scenes in this one, whereas in the other one there were 2 really good action scenes in the first episode, right? With Dodge, but there was nothing in this. You know what I mean? There was no cool, anything. You know what I mean, as far as action or anything like that.
Well, and Orville Nation does bring up a good point that there was the CSI Picard moment, but yeah, I personally didn't find this episode to be terribly memorable. The only scene I really remember is the confrontation with I think it was the CNC, the head of Starfleet, between Picard and that That was
that you cannot describe that as an action scene. That's just
no. I'm just saying
dramatic scene, but there's no action. I mean, we didn't see any fights. We didn't see anything like that. There were no phasers being fired in the beginning. Okay, in the very beginning. So right. There is that, and we will address that right off the bat because I have a lot to say about that.
And all I'm saying is that I'm not saying that was a memorable action scene. I'm just saying that's the only memorable moment from this episode. It sticks with me because I found it to be kind of shocking to see, how Starfleet looked. Because I get that you want to reflect real world stuff that's going on, and I know that we find ourselves in a questionable time, depending upon where you fall politically on the spectrum. So I get that, and I understand that we want to reflect that, but I just wished, like Erica said before, they'd found a different way to do it than to use Starfleet. Like I hate the idea that we have to tear down, Starfleet in order to say something about what's happening today. In a sense, kind of like Bobby Chambers mentioned earlier, that also breaks the immersion too. When there's too much of the current political state being reflected, you add in the and then you have the modern lingo in that moment, and the whole thing is just sort of, you realize you're watching, a show. You realize that's, and you're questioning, depending upon how you fall politically, you're questioning what you're hearing, and kind of like Eric, I my heart broke a little bit to realize that, last episode I had my Delta on. I don't have it on this episode because I don't know. So I mean, and that's how it affected me, because I felt, because I knew I needed to watch it again for the show, but I didn't. I just didn't, and it kind of killed my motivation to read issue 3 of the comic, because I'm like going, are we going to double down on this in the comic? Because in the comic there's even less reason to take your foot off the gas in the comic. I mean, in the comic, normally you slam the gas pedal all the way to the floor, right? And so I was like, So it was interesting that reading the comic that they doubled down on that philosophy a little bit, but they did it the way that they used to. It's reflected in the alien civilization, so that was good. That was more classic Trek. But at the same point,
and that's always my point. By the way, that's always my point when I hear Star Trek writers saying, well, this is too hard to write. Where's the conflict? Because I hear that all the time from Star Trek writers. I'll see them in interviews and they complain about that, you put the conflict with the aliens. How hard is that? You know what I mean? You don't do it with the human beings. You show all those bad elements of humanity through the aliens, not through the humans. I don't understand why that's such a difficult concept. Or it's so hard to write that, because to me, it totally makes sense. And I can totally understand that. And then you can go down all sorts of avenues with these other civilizations, with the Romulans, with the Klingons, with the Ferengi. You know what I mean? That's what they were for. They were to show dark elements of ourselves, But the idea was that the humans are doing pretty good. The humans they're evolved. They're supposed to be better than the modern human being.
Yeah, it's that idea that we found a way to pull ourselves out of the mire and the pettiness and war and everything, and basically lift everyone up so that society as a whole is not only more unified, but at the same point all about not just bettering ourselves, but actually reaching out and finding other civilizations, learning from them, and using that to improve upon ourselves. And it's such a beautiful way to think about the future, and that's one of the things I've always loved about Star Trek is that idea, in Star Trek Picard's timeline, even though they have the more advanced technology, I would not want to serve on a Federation starship in this time frame. I wouldn't at all. And as we keep moving forward, I keep finding myself in the same place. It's like I'd rather serve aboard the original Enterprise. I'd rather be a part of Starfleet. During the time of Kirk and Spock in the original 5-year mission. And they weren't all totally simpatico there either, but at least that cohesive vision, that idea of what Starfleet represents. I love having something noble to strive for, having
Right.
something noble to strive towards. Something bigger and larger than yourself. That in trying to attain that idea, you want to help others and be a better person. I really love that idea. And I'm glad that the Orville has taken up that idea, and that classic Trek vision does live on somewhere.
Just not in Star Trek right now.
Well, it's funny because, that that idea still exists in Red Skirts. The webcomic series I do with Al Sparrow. I mean, it's part of the reason that Trek has endured. I know a lot of people don't like Enterprise for a lot of different reasons, but at least sometimes that idea is still there. You know what I mean? Like I hate that we have to tear Starfleet down, to create a great, dramatic sci-fi series. I think you could have still done it without tearing Starfleet down. Since Picard is not even serving in Starfleet and going to be part of a ragtag group off in space, I don't even see where you had to do it at all. Starfleet can sit over here doing its thing, and Picard can go off and have his mission. I was kind of secretly hoping that's what they were going to do, but now I realize that that's not the case. So, but yeah. So I guess, is that good for our initial impressions, or are we already talking?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think we need to get into this.
All right. Okay. So now we're going to get into our spoiler-filled part of the conversation. The most memorable moment for me was when Picard went back to basically Starfleet headquarters. He talked to the CNC, and basically wanted to be reinstated for a limited time to perform this one mission. This, of course, is after he finds out that he basically does have a terminal illness. And
well, let's back up, because the first sequence doesn't have anything to do with this, right? So the first sequence is a flashback, right?
Right.
The first sequence is a flashback, and I think there's a lot to talk about just in that first sequence that really they pissed me off from the get-go. Okay. We did in our lead up to Picard, we talked about Measure of a Man. Okay, widely considered one of the best episodes in all Trek. Okay, and widely considered the first great next gen episode is Measure of a Man. This is the episode that introduces Maddox. Maddox apparently is going to be very important in Picard. They talked about Maddox a lot in this episode.
That's true.
Maddox was trying to basically disassemble Data so he could make more Datas, and the process probably was going to destroy Data as an individual. And Data realized this, so he didn't want to do it. And Picard had to go to bat for Data to establish the rights of Sung-style androids. Okay, this has already been done. Like, this is the second season of Next Generation. So when we start out with this episode of Picard, Maps and Legends, we see what's happened with the Sung-style androids that apparently now are manufactured, and there's lots of them. They're no longer unique. They even look like Data. They even have the yellowish skin and everything like that. And they're treated like property, like possessions, like machines. They are not treated as like individuals. And the supervisors, the human supervisors, were just terrible. I mean, they're like the kind of worst, catcalling construction workers you see today. The way they treated the androids and the way they regarded them.
Right.
There was nothing enlightened about them. It was so anti-Trek, and you can kind of see, okay, so you're kind of sitting there like, okay, so did the synths revolt because they were treated so poorly? Is that the reason they revolted? Of course, that's not apparently what happened. Apparently what happened was they were hacked, which I did kind of like. That's kind of interesting. I'll give
Right.
that. That's kind of interesting because I guess the obvious way to go was that they were mistreated and they revolted because we've seen that a billion times, right? That happens all the time in science fiction. It's such an old trope. I'm sick of it. Okay, but I guess that's not what they did in this one. So hey, I found something I liked. So you know what? That was kind of cool. The fact that they were hacked and they didn't just revolt because they were treated so poorly, which they were treated poorly. Measure of a Man apparently has been erased, even though Maddox is all over the place in this episode. Does that make any sense to you?
No.
I mean,
No,
Maddox is all over this episode. It's like, didn't you guys watch Measure of a Man? You're talking about Maddox all the time, but it seems like you completely ignored and forgot the lesson of that episode, which is that the Sung-style aliens are androids are people. That was already legally established. They can't be treated like that. And if they are treated like that, then that's wrong, right? So, my little rant. Orville Nation says, Eric Hulk, Kurtzman, you wouldn't want to see me when I'm angry. Yes, Kurtzman would not want to see me when I'm angry. I don't like what Kurtzman is doing with Star Trek at all. I think you can see that there's a lack of leadership in Trek right now. Same as the criticisms I have of Star Wars. There's a lack of leadership. There's a clear lack of leadership, a clear lack of direction. And like I said, it just boggles my mind that Maddox, who only appeared in one episode, Measure of a Man, he's talked about in a couple other episodes. He's only in one episode of TNG, and it's considered one of the best episodes. And it's like they completely lost the point of that episode. Now Maddox is just some sort of, I guess, crazy mad scientist who's been experimenting on the Siths, the synths, now that they call them the androids, and all the lessons learned in Measure of a Man, that these are individuals, that they have to be treated with respect, that just all got tossed out the window. And these humans, those human workers were just, I mean, like I said, it's like the worst modern those construction worker stereotype was those people. This is supposed to be the future. That's the future. That's the way people are going to be. And they even said that basically they're like the supervisors, the skeleton crew, because the androids are doing all the work. These guys are like in charge of the androids. They're the humans overseeing the androids. And they're complete unevolved apes. They're completely unevolved apes. The way that they talk, the way that they interact with the synths, the way they treat that synth, like he's a toaster, right? That was the argument in Measure of a Man. Is Data essentially a toaster? They said no, he's not. So it really, right off the bat, it upset me that it seems like they just completely forgot the important part of Measure of a Man. Like the actual important part of the episode was just tossed away. Doesn't exist anymore.
I did find that was weird that they did just pretty much at the beginning of this episode kind of a do it. I did, weirdly enough, enjoy seeing the kind of Data like some androids, because I like the idea that Data lives on in some form or some idea. But I did think it was unfortunate that it does appear as though they were basically, in sort of a form of slavery. And that they're housed in this room where they're just kind of turned on. And it kind of goes back again to that idea about reflecting, current events in Trek, because, we're headed to that place where maybe in our, soon future, we're going to have, robots that are part of our society. We're seeing, advances in robotics continuing to evolve. And there may eventually be that time where man and machine do interact in a more level that we as humans think of that interaction would be, as opposed to the way that we currently interact with machines, like right now, where I'm talking into it, So,
but that's already changing. I mean, I have a Alexa. You know what I mean? I talk to that thing all the time. You know what I mean? And I'm not a jerk to it. My mom is kind of funny because I got her an Alexa for Christmas, for Christmas. And it's funny because she says things like please and thank you and stuff like that to Alexa, So it's like, my modern day mother is more evolved than those apes in that episode. I do want to bring out a comment from Orville Nation because he makes an interesting point. He says, granted, the synths may not be as evolved as Data, and I could see that. I mean, I don't think that synth was at Data's level. He was kind of more like at B-Force level, right? I would say.
Right, but
right?
I'm just saying, I enjoyed visually seeing the idea of Data continuing to live on in a form in which we could kind of recognize. But from the original trailer, I thought what had happened is they were trying to create, just like Maddox had said, recreate kind of the magic alchemy that created Data in order for every starship to have someone like Data who could be a part of their crew because of the benefit they would bring to the crew, to themselves, to Starfleet in general. Not necessarily enslaving them. I wanted to believe in the more higher idea of Maddox as opposed to the lower idea of what Maddox was trying to do. But that idea, I thought that's in the trailer. That's what we were seeing, is that these were the versions that Starfleet had created that maybe Maddox had helped, create, but they were in storage because, kind of like before, they never really worked right. So they're just kind of like in a storage closet because they don't know what else to do with them. To see them trotted out to basically do slave labor, on the shipping yards or whatever, the shipyards, I was kind of dismayed at that. And to get back to that one action sequence, we did see the synths wipe all those people out. I'd kind of forgotten about that because I guess I didn't.
And then they wiped themselves out, apparently.
Yeah, committed suicide. So I don't know if that's so we don't have to see them again.
Right.
We're not going to revisit them, because when they first started talking about the rogue synths, like when we were reviewing Children of Mars, the short trek, I thought that they were essentially sentient, and maybe they were, for some reason, saw the Federation as a threat, or maybe they had been co-opted with the Borg, or maybe they were in league with the Borg, or maybe they had discovered lore, and through lore, you know what I mean? Like, I thought there was something more going on, and they were like their own evolved kind of race of beings. So when they said,
I thought we were getting a new faction. I thought that we were going to have like a rogue faction, and I thought that was fascinating. Apparently, nope, they all killed themselves, and no, that's not what happened.
And so we're obviously not going to, probably be revisiting them. And I thought it was weird too, like the idea that's put forth in the show that the super shadowy Tal Shiar, the super Tal Shiar, whatever we're going to call them. I know they have a name, but I'm not going to use it. But the super shadowy Tal Shiar, that this is all because they hate the idea of artificial life forms. So they have the artificial life forms.
We need to get there because I have a lot to say about that whole thing. I have a lot. Yeah. So I just want to make sure that we kind of went through the.
I'm ready to just go for the throat. So why don't you drive the crazy train? So.
Well, I just want to make sure we hit the beats of the story. You know what I mean? As they occur on screen. So that happens. We find out what happened on Utopia Punisha. Apparently, the synths were hacked into, and then they turned the defenses of the planet on itself and killed everybody, including themselves. They wiped themselves out as well. And this was, of course, the place where they were building the rescue fleet that's also shown in the Countdown comic book. This is where, we don't know, Geordi supposedly was there, according to the comic book, but we didn't get to see that in this episode. That wasn't addressed at all. And it wasn't addressed in the comic book, which really irritates me because they could have addressed it in the comic book. But anyway,
I had a horrifying moment for half a second that the comic was going to end with the Utopia shipyards being attacked, and because they showed Geordi in his office and he's talking to Picard, and I thought they were literally going to show the attack, and they were going to show Geordi going, "Oh," something exploding in the background, and Picard being like, "Geordi," and it's this to be continued in, you know what I mean? Like, I for half a second I thought that's how it was going to end, and I was like going, "Oh, you can't do that. You can't end by suggesting that Geordi died in the attack."
But I will say
they didn't. So
I will say that is addressed in the show, though. We just don't know if Geordi was present during the attack or not. But there's evidence in the show that says he survived the attack. We'll get to that. So after that scene, we obviously have what you were talking about earlier, where Picard basically comes to the conclusion that he has to get back into Starfleet, right? He decides that he has to get back into Starfleet because he needs a ship. He wants to investigate what's going on because he knows something weird's going on. He wants to find Maddox. He wants to know, obviously he wants to find Dodge's sister. And so as he's kind of putting this together, as PJ said from Orville Nation about this is the Picard CSI part where he's starting to try to put everything together. He comes to the conclusion that he needs to rejoin Starfleet. He needs to go back to Starfleet, and he needs to get a small ship, small crew, and investigate what's going on, which makes sense. I'm with the story there. That okay. So he wants to pieces this all together. He thinks, all right, I need to get back into Starfleet. The first step in that is he has to have a physical. He has to be shown that he is fit to be back out in space, back in the service of Starfleet. So one thing that a lot of fans, I think, have been confused about, and definitely I think this could be significant, is why didn't he call Beverly? Apparently, instead of calling Beverly to do his physical, he calls his old doctor from the Stargazer, which is not bad. I mean, I think it's kind of interesting that they kind of showed another character from Picard's past, someone from the Stargazer, but it does make the obvious question, where the heck is Beverly? Because it would seem to me Beverly would be the more logical choice, not just because of the show. In terms of story, in terms of plot, character development, Beverly and Picard always had a special relationship. So when it comes to something so personal and something that could, they could find something bad. So he's got to find someone he can trust, implicitly to do this for him, because it turns out he does have problems. Of course, we already knew that. We know that from the way Next Generation ended, All Good Things. We know that Picard has some sort of a dementia, some sort of version of Alzheimer's that he hasn't necessarily really experienced yet, although apparently he's in the early stages of that. So I thought that was odd too. It's like, so they're like, is this supposed to be like a big revelation that Picard is sick? Because anybody who saw Next Gen, All Good Things, knows that Picard has this problem. I can't remember what the disease is called, but we knew that already. And so they just kind of re-emphasized that like it was like some sort of big reveal. It's like, okay, yeah, I already knew that. So move on, So of course, and they dance around it too. Like they don't even use the term, the name, because he was already diagnosed from this with Beverly. So I found that odd. But in terms of the story, and in terms of, I know a lot of fans are wondering, where the hell is Beverly? Oh, hey, PJ has an answer for us. I like this. So he says Gates McFadden was having surgery during the filming. So she could not participate even if they wanted to. So thank you, PJ. Thank you for that insight, because that answers a big question there, because a lot of fans have been wondering, why wasn't that Beverly? Why didn't Beverly show up and do the physical and go through this whole thing? Because she already diagnosed the problem. She diagnosed the problem in All Good Things, that Picard does have some sort of dementia. And apparently he's just now starting to experience the first symptoms of it, right? The dreams are apparently part of it, So he's starting to get the Alzheimer's, for lack of a better term. It's starting to get the onset of it, right?
Right.
But we already knew that. Anybody who watched the show already knew that. That wasn't a big reveal. But I really appreciate that insight about McFadden having surgery, because that it does answer that question of, because it seems like an obvious choice. Why not bring Gates in to do that role, to be that person? So he basically, even though he has this problem, they're basically going to hide it, and he gets the okay on the physical, because everything else is good. Physically, everything else is good. Picard is fit for service. So with his physical in hand, he goes down to Starfleet headquarters, and right out the bat, they start pissing me off. Now, I knew this was coming because there was a leak of a teaser that they gave. They gave all the the ad people, like all the people that do commercials for CBS All Access. They got a teaser, and I think we reported it on our podcast. We talked about it, where they did a teaser, and that was the scene. The scene was Picard going up to Starfleet headquarters, and the Starfleet guy being all like, "Who are you?" And once again, that Starfleet officer seems so contemporary, so like lackadaisical. I mean, just undisciplined. I mean, he didn't seem like a Starfleet officer to me. He didn't seem like a modern officer to me. You know what I mean? He just seemed like a dude, like a clerk, at Circle K. Like
exactly.
the clueless
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
That's what he seemed like to me. And then he's just so disrespectful. And I didn't get this myself. I saw this comment from the Critical Drinker. He did this on. So I want to give him credit because he's the one that pointed this out, and I'm just like, that's really true. Because there were so many things I was angry about. I didn't even notice this, but okay, Picard was just on the news talking about the anniversary of the Romulan supernova. So even if this guy is a Circle K clerk moron, he would have seen the broadcast and know who Picard was. Right. Even if Picard is forgotten, and which is ridiculous. I mean, they show the Enterprise D is shown holographically. It's obviously a big deal because they're showing the Enterprise D, in Starfleet headquarters, the hologram. So it's just stupid to begin with. I mean, any way you look at it, it's just stupid. His reaction is stupid. It doesn't make any sense. But even if he is just this clueless Circle K clerk, okay, and he doesn't know anything about the history of Starfleet, he doesn't watch the news either. He's that bad. I mean, he's that stupid. He's that out of it that he doesn't even watch the news. Picard was just on the news talking about all this stuff. How does he not know who he is? So I really hated that. And I knew it was coming because there was that leak. And I think we talked about it on a previous episode because they had that meeting with the advertisers, and that's the scene they showed. So I knew about the scene. But once I actually saw it, it was just like, I knew it was coming, and it was just even worse than I could imagine. It was just god awful. So he goes, and now he's going to his meeting with the actual head of Starfleet, the highest admiral in Starfleet, the chief of operations, right?
Right.
And that scene, holy moly! Even people that are like, defending this episode and like this episode or whatever, or still really into the show, even they don't like this scene. I mean, this scene was just horrible. The way that the commander of Starfleet treats Picard, I mean, with such contempt. And she's so like, she's a ditz. She's like so dismissive of what he's saying. Like, oh, yeah, Picard's just a moron. You know what? There are lots of personality conflicts in any job, military, any job. There are personality conflicts. I could see the admiral being mad at Picard for leaving Starfleet and for saying what he said on the news broadcast. I get that. I understand that. That could make sense. She could be angry with him for leaving Starfleet, and she could be angry with the comments he made on the news broadcast. But at the same time, that doesn't mean now she's an incompetent moron, because she's just totally dismissive of all the stuff that he's talking about, which could have huge, grave consequences for the Federation and Starfleet. We're talking about massive security problems that could have a huge effect on the Federation. And she's just like, he's just crazy. She just totally dismisses him, like, oh, you're just trying to get your glory back, Picard, And she uses the F word and everything, which I'm like, oh yeah, the producers must have thought that's so edgy. You know what I mean? That's so edgy that she used the F word. To me, it's just like, it's mind numbing. And I didn't like it. I didn't like the way that they even portrayed her, because she's supposed to be the highest admiral in Starfleet. And you'd think that person would be pretty bright. And even if she has a conflict with Picard, doesn't like Picard, you know what? She still knows that he's one of the best ever in Starfleet. And she's going to take what he says seriously, even if she doesn't like him. But apparently that's just like too difficult a concept for these writers to get. It's like, yeah, she can dislike him, but that doesn't mean she's just going to dismiss everything that he said and treat him like he's I don't know. Treat him like he's just some senile old man, right?
Yeah,
Apparently, I get maybe she knows about his diagnosis. I don't know, but
I
PJ said that's a terrible scene, and like I said, even people that are defending this episode hate that scene.
well, because I guess, and it's one of those things. I wish whenever they would do something like this, um, I wish we would actually get someone to play, like for example, if they're going to do this scene, I wish we would have had someone in that Admiralty CNC, Commander of Starfleet position, who's a character that we've seen before that maybe Picard has had a clash with in the past, and then it's a little bit easier to take some of this. I mean, it's still hard to take, you know what I mean? But at least then you can be like, oh, well, this person's running Starfleet. Well, no wonder. But at the same point, um, yeah, it was just hard to watch because it's literally you're watching, the ideals of what the Starfleet represents, and the Federation to an extent too. It's just it's slipping through the fingers. They're kind of writing off Starfleet as this noble idea that could never really be. And that's kind of what's coming across in that scene. And it's shocking too to think that someone could be that dismissive of Picard that we haven't, because if it was a character that Picard had interacted with before in the past, like it's a fun cameo, but more than that, if it's a character that he clashed with in the past, it's easy to understand that there's bad blood between the two of them. So when she kind of tears into him a little bit, if it was someone else coming from someone else, it'd be a little bit easier to take. It's like, oh well, that dude was always a dick. You know what I mean? No wonder things are like this. They've got the wrong person in charge. You know what I mean? It's easier for you as a fan, you know what I mean, to kind of maybe not immediately go, oh, well, this is all doomed. But when it's a character that we really have no connection from before, who's basically being this dismissive of literally, as far as Starfleet is concerned, a living legend, because that's what Captain Picard and the successes of the Enterprise in his time as in command is. I mean, he's like a living legend. That would be like watching, what was it they used to call Admiral Nagura in the motion picture era. It would. I mean, could you imagine watching this scene with Kirk, like someone talking to Kirk like that?
Oh, Kirk would have just punched her.
Yeah, exactly. It would never have happened. And that was
her. You know what I mean?
when I was watching that scene, that's all I could think of. Is like, no one would ever talk this way to Kirk. Why is someone talking this way to Picard? I mean, it's like it would be like, telling George Washington, you're full of it. I mean, it's, as in Star Trek terms anyway. You know what I mean? It just it's such a hard thing to watch. And like I said, it just, the fact that it's a character that we have no connection with or no past history with too makes it even harsher. Because if it was someone that we'd seen before that Picard had, for example, the lady, I can't remember her name. They had the issues with the Stargazer Tribunal, and she's actually from Measure of a Man
again.
If that had been her, if that had been her sitting there, and she'd been saying that to him, they'd be like, well, she's always been out to get him. She's such a, you know what I mean? Like, it'd be easier to kind of, take Picard's side and maybe be a little bit more, oh, well, it's just as bad because of who's in charge. But with it being a character we have no connection to whatsoever, as far as I can tell, I mean, if it's a character from the novels or whatever, that I mean, it needs to be someone that we've seen before,
Right.
It feels really mean spirited on the writer's part, because you hear them coming through saying Starfleet could never exist. This is never going to happen. So let's move on. And I hate the idea of throwing away what Starfleet represents. I'd like to believe that maybe as a people we can one day be better than the sum of our conflict and our petty differences. I'd
Yeah.
like to think that.
Well, think of it this way: if Colin Powell went to the current chairman of the Joint Chiefs and told him that he had evidence or he had some sort of dealing with some sort of a conspiracy involving, say, Al Qaeda or even the Russians or whatever, even if they have bad blood, even if they didn't like each other, you know what I mean? He's going to listen to him.
Yeah.
And he's going to take the accusation seriously. That's the real problem I have with it too. You know what I mean? It's like, it's one thing, okay, maybe they have bad blood, but to be so dismissive, of what he's saying when he's making some he's making some accusations that are very serious. And didn't he just have an interview with the press where he said something that she didn't like? And couldn't he just go do that again?
Yeah.
Couldn't he just go to the press and tell them what happened and what's going on, and that Starfleet doesn't want to do anything about it? I mean, it's just a very shallow scene, and it was really just meant to get the F word out. That's all that scene was about. The whole point of that scene was to say that, Picard's kind of washed up, and Starfleet sucks now, and we wanted to get the F word out. We want an excuse to say the F word. That's how I take it.
Yeah.
The scene serves to me no other purpose. But advancing the episode past that, of course, now Picard realizes he can't get back into Starfleet. That wall is, that door has closed. So now he has to figure out what to do. And so he's talking to his servant. He talks to his caretakers, and the first thing they do, which I liked, was the male says, "Hey, why don't you get your old crew together? Worf, Geordi, Riker, they'll help you. They're your best friends, right?"
Right.
And then he just dismisses it. He just says, "Oh, I don't want to live with that, because they would be sacrificing. What something bad happens?" It's like, what? So wait, so you're basically, it's kind of funny. So the conclusion they come to is like, basically he has to find people who hate him, which I'm just like, okay, so you're basically saying whatever this new crew is, you don't give a crap about them. You don't care about them, because the reason you won't get Riker, Geordi, and Worf back together is because you care about them and you don't want to see them get hurt for you. So apparently we now know the new crew, Picard doesn't give a crap about them. That's the implication of that scene.
Yeah, it's
the implication of that scene is that Picard doesn't give a damn about anybody in the show as far as the new cast.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is, I think that's the way we're all going to be, right? That's the way I take it.
It would have made more sense if Picard just hired a crew. And it was like the Firefly scenario, and he's just chartered, kind of like Obi-Wan and Luke. He just charters a space flight, and they just happen to get stuck on this journey with him, and then you have all kinds of drama. I mean, because literally it's what you're doing. You're just taking Picard and sticking him on the Firefly, and because they're adventurers and they won't shy from a fight or doing what's right when they see something wrong happening, you know what I mean? Like, it's that and that idea sounds fun, but the fact that Picard has, a connection to all of them, it does seem mean-spirited. It does seem like he's like, well, these people are expendable, so we'll go Star Trekking with them.
Right. That's what he said. The guy even says, you need to find people you hate or hate you or something like that is the line that he says. Yeah. Which I thought was kind of funny. But I'm also like, wait a second. That means Picard doesn't give a crap about any of these people. That reasoning is very poor, because it basically, like I said, it implies that Picard does not care about the new characters. So why should we? Why should we care about them?
And to go back to the Countdown comic, when the character said that, and then he went to go see this Raffi character, because we hadn't read the third issue yet, I thought, oh, well, maybe in the Countdown comic, we'll learn why her and Picard clearly have issues. We'll learn why, but we don't. We don't at all. The count, as far as we can tell, they're totally simpatico at the end of the Countdown comic.
Right.
So I don't know why she just so shoot him,
Yeah,
right?
that he actually pulls a
So,
gun on him. I mean, come
but
on, you know?
yeah, yeah. So
And this is
I've
the person that calls him JL in the comic book. You know,
right,
that's a terrible tie-in. You know what I mean? As far as it doesn't make any sense. So
yeah,
I assume obviously we're going to learn more about why she hates him or what the falling out was. Um, but yeah, I mean, she's pulling a gun on the guy. You know, what
yeah,
he's coming up with a bottle of Chateau Picard, just, you know, obviously kind of make amends, and you know, apparently that's the selling point is the wine because she realizes, oh, he's got the wine with him, so I'll have him come and talk to me. But I do want to back up just a little bit because clearly they did say Geordi's name, so obviously Geordi's still alive because they said otherwise they would have said, well, Geordi's dead, so he can't help me. So
yeah,
Geordi
yeah,
obviously is alive. Worf is obviously alive. We know Riker's alive because we know he's going to be in another episode. We know Troy is alive. But interestingly enough, going back to Beverly, we still don't know her fate because they didn't mention her name,
right,
and that has some fans speculating that she is dead, that they killed her off screen, which would be really bad. If they killed her off screen, that's going to be really bad. But I don't know if that's the case. I'm not claiming inside knowledge or anything like that, but they did not mention her name. So it does have
right,
a lot of fans worried that Beverly is dead. And it would make, you know, honestly, it would make a lot of sense if Beverly was dead because if Beverly was alive, it seems very difficult for me to believe that she would not be involved in this process somewhere. Because again, Beverly and Picard had a very special relationship that goes beyond captain and doctor. They were good friends. Picard was in love with her. You know, in all good things, apparently they had been married. And we don't know yet if that was the case in this timeline or not. If Picard and Beverly were married, divorced. I mean, that could explain it if they were divorced and they're not on good terms. You know, that happens.
right,
Um,
right,
the other scenario that I thought about was if they maybe did go with all good things in terms that Beverly is still in Starfleet. Maybe she's just not on the planet and she's on a mission somewhere, so she's not accessible. I could see that because it seems to me that it would seem strange to me if they would jettison the whole idea of Beverly eventually having her own command and all that kind of stuff. Um, so that's another possibility, I guess, is that maybe she's just not accessible because she's on a deep space mission or whatever, you know. Um, but it does have some fans worried because they specifically did not mention her name.
yeah. I'm curious because I like the idea of her being the captain of the Pasteur, you know, and um, I guess in my mind I still haven't given up on the idea that you know we will still see good elements of Starfleet at some point over the course of the show. They can't all be evil. I know that's
No,
grasping at straws.
we need to keep going with this episode because apparently they are.
No, I understand that. I understand that I am, grasping at straws, but I still like the idea, that, maybe, they're that, because it would be fun to see her kind of swoop in the midst of something and, help out Picard, on his, thing that he's doing. I think
Thing that he's
anyway.
doing.
Yeah,
The
his
MacGuffin that he's chasing.
yeah, yeah.
Which apparently is Maddox, right? Isn't Maddox the MacGuffin basically?
Yeah, I'm assuming that he's after Daj's sister, because of her connection to Data. And then I assume along the way we're gonna find out what happened to Maddox, you know.
But he specifically
Um
said his mission was to find Maddox. He wants to find Maddox because Maddox
well,
is the
yeah,
person that he thinks has all the answers. So
right,
obviously he wants to protect Dodge's sister. That's part of the mission as well. Because he feels that she's in grave danger since obviously they killed her sister.
right,
And he doesn't know what's actually going on, but we kind of do, right? Because we do get to see a scene later where basically the admiral decides to basically, I'm assuming the Commodore, who appears to be Vulcan but could be Romulan. I assume the Commodore is like the head of Starfleet security, and that's
right,
why the admiral kind of does a courtesy call, which is kind of like due diligence or whatever. She's like, Picard's an idiot, but look into this just in case it's something real, right? Even though she's totally dismissing it when she's calling her, she's totally dismissive of it, but she's covering her bases. All right, so apparently she's not completely incompetent. So she does go ahead, and I assume that because she's in yellow, and she refers to her as a Commodore, which Commodore is kind of a weird rank because I don't know if people know this or not, but a Commodore traditionally is kind of thought of as a one-star admiral, but that's not really what a Commodore is. A Commodore, at least in the United States military, was usually a captain who was in charge of other ships. So they'd call him a Commodore because he was actually in charge of the fleet. You know what I mean?
Right.
So anyway, they're using that in whatever context. I'm assuming she's like supposed to be like a one pip admiral or whatever. And she seems to be the head of Starfleet security. That's what I'm guessing. Possibly Starfleet intelligence, but I'm thinking Starfleet security. Apparently she's corrupt. She's in league with, oh wait, we forgot. Did I skip over the super secret Tal Shiar? Was that before?
We found out you did, but we've already talked about that there's the super secret shadowy Tal Shiar, so
But I really want to talk about that because that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
So let me set it up real quick. So it turns out they're trying to figure out who it is who would have possibly killed Daj that's after her and after her sister. And the Romulan caretakers from the Picard comic, they kind of tell the story of this sort of Romulan boogeyman organization that is the super secret, super shadowy offshoot of the Tal Shiar. And this goes back to Orville Nation's comment because they said that basically the
Zot Vash. Super secret Zot Vash goes back to the pre-Vulcan Romulan separation. I did not catch that. That's a good catch by PJ. So it predates the separation. That means that the super secret Tal Shiar go all the way back to Vulcan.
They may even go back to before the Tal Shiar. So maybe they were the initial group that the Tal Shiar spun out of, or maybe they created the Tal Shiar to mask their own motivations. But apparently the car wash, whatever we're going to call them, they are so super secretive, whatever. And one of their aims and goals is that they don't like I assume they don't like the idea of synthetic android people like Data because it's a threat to them, right? Is that kind of what you were pulling from that? Is that because they try to give them that motivation?
I just think it's something that they thought was important to the plot, that they established some sort of group that doesn't like sense. I don't think they have any notion of why they don't like sense. I don't know. I think it's a mess. I think it's a mess, and it's a dumb idea. So
I believe it connects back. I forget the episode, but it's the one where Data outwits the Tal Shiar Romulan character whose name I can't remember right now.
Sela.
Yeah, Sela. I think it goes back to that, and I think that it's going to come out that Sela is a part of the Zot Vash. I want to find another way to say that. And that this group feels threatened by the idea of what synthetic creatures like Data in the Federation and in Starfleet represent, because it's a threat that they can't, kind of defeat in a sense. I mean, I know they hacked them, so they did defeat them, but you know what I mean? Like, I think that's why they want them destroyed, is because they don't like the idea, the threat that like you said, a new faction like that could technically represent the ideals of Starfleet and the Federation. They don't like that because that's not a threat they can easily overcome.
Well, I want to point out that when this whole exchange is happening, the female Romulan caretaker, she specifically says, "Oh, haven't you ever wondered why the Romulans don't have any AI and they don't have any cyberneticists or anything like that?" That's a total, complete contradiction of established lore in Star Trek. There is a specific episode where a Romulan defector actually tells Data right to his face, I know a lot of cyberneticists that would like to get their hands on you and take you apart back in the Romulan Empire. I mean, it was said in the show directly. And the fact that these writers are so lazy, they claim to be Star Trek fans, and they don't know that or don't care, just boggles my mind. That kind of stuff is just so irritating to me. And PJ says, this whole thing, the whole Zosh Vash predates the Vulcan Romulan separation. It opens up a Pandora's box of messing with canon, and he's absolutely correct. It really does. He also mentions it probably means that they're entrenched in Vulcan society too. That's the implication, that the Vulcans are also a part of this, which is possibly why the Commodore is working with them, because she's Vulcan. So apparently Vulcan's been corrupt all this time too. That's the implication as well.
But the implication is that it's all corrupt. That everyone's like part of, and that's the thing. I don't. It's like the Illuminati. It's like Section 31 wasn't enough, so now we've got to create the Star Trek Illuminati.
We've got to create the super secret Section 31, because Section 31 is now running around with badges and Discovery, so they're not secret anymore. They're not secret enough,
I guess they just love the idea of Section 31 versus the whatever they're called, the Zot
Vash,
whatever it is. They just seem to want to, that's what we need. It's like, what is it? MI6 versus Spectre. Like is that what they think that we need in Star Trek? Like
apparently, yeah.
Because apparently they're supposed to start filming Section 31 here pretty soon, and if this all has to tie together some sort of way as a cohesive universe,
you're right. That's
eventually
right. This is our lead up to Section 31 show. You're right. That's exactly what this. Oh man.
So
it's just amazing that they feel like in order to make their shows work, they just have to destroy everything good in Star Trek. Because they're so lazy. Because they're just so darn lazy and don't want to do their homework, and they don't want to have to write with these quote unquote limitations. And they don't have the courage to do something like an alternate universe. At least JJ was doing that, They got to say nope, it's canon, it's prime, or whatever that even means. Orville Nation, that's a little inside joke with him and me. We don't need no stinking Section 31 badges. That's right. We don't need no stinking badges. That's right. I just think it's a mess, and the implication that basically, because it appears that the Commodore is Vulcan, they said that that she's working with this the super secret Tal Shiar. She's working with them. Her adjutant is a agent of the super secret Tal Shiar, who's masquerading as a human. But the implication is the reason they're working together is because the super secret Tal Shiar goes back before the separation, and therefore the Vulcans are just as corrupt as the Romulans.
It's weird because I feel like that we've done some of this storyline before, like the human-looking Romulan who's secretly a double agent. Like we did that in Discovery. Like I don't, because they did the same thing. They surgically altered a Klingon to the point that he didn't know what he was anymore. Spoiler alert. Was just, I thought, actually kind of an interesting. Some of what they were doing that I thought was kind of interesting, but I feel like it's like I hope they're not about to rehash something they just did. Like
I wouldn't put it past them, because I don't think there's a lot of creativity in that writer's room.
Oh,
I have no faith in that writer's room at all at this point. What really irritates me is, did you watch the Ready Room? Did you watch the Ready Room for this one?
Yeah, but just like the show, it just didn't stick with me very much, because I talked to Akiva Goldsman, and it was
who swears up and down that he's a hardcore Trek fan, and I'm just like, I don't see it, bro. I really don't see it. And And the other thing was he admitted that they are absolutely trying to make Picard like topical and contemporary, you know, in terms of politics. And this is sort of
Right.
our statement about how terrible the world is now. You know, I was just like, God, man, really? You know,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah.
You know, and it really bums me because I had such a good time listening to Shaban talk. I really
Yeah.
think Shaban, like, he came across as a really sincere person in his interview. But it's Goldstein, right? That's his name?
I think
Yeah,
it's Goldsman. I think it's
Goldman,
Akiva Goldsman.
Akiva Goldman. Oh man, he just came across as such a liar. You know what I mean? Just lying through his teeth to me. You know what I mean? Just I don't know. I really don't. It's very obvious that there's an agenda behind this show. Oh, did you also catch the the comment where the scientist from the Daystrom Institute goes to visit Picard, and he actually says, "I never liked science fiction."
Yep. Yeah, I did.
That's Patrick Stewart. That's
Yeah.
Pat. He has said that Patrick Stewart, and it's like, okay, this isn't Picard. I mean, how many astronauts do you know that don't like science fiction? You know, it's like it doesn't compute. You know, this is a guy
Yeah.
whose whole career has been exploring space, but I don't like science fiction. That's because Patrick Stewart doesn't like science fiction. And I thought that was such a kind of like, oh man, really? You went there? So now Picard is just like you. You know what I mean? He's not a
Right.
character anymore. And it's like, man, that's such a bad move, in my opinion. That's just such a bad move because it's so telling to me as someone who's a big fan. I am a big fan of Patrick Stewart, you know, as far as his acting, his career, all that stuff. But I know he's said many times he was never into science fiction. He never watched the original Star Trek. He is not a fan. And he just said it in the show. I am not a fan of Star Trek. I am not a fan of science fiction. That's not what this show is. That's what that line says to me. This show is not Star Trek. I've never liked Star Trek. I'm doing something different.
Yeah. Well, you have to remember, well, not remember. It's just, it's weird because Akiva Goldsman has written something that I love because he actually wrote the screenplay for Batman Forever. I was just double checking that to make sure. But then he's also wrote something I totally despise because he also wrote Batman and Robin. Um, so I feel like that whole thing with the patch, because they had like the original, like the old Star Trek convention patch, like is his geek cred. They had to roll the geek cred out. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Oh, I got this
Um,
patch from yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
and he may have, um, but yeah, I don't know. I
keep in
just I
mind, keep in mind, by the way, Shaban said that it was Kurtzman and gosh, I'm gonna Akiva, okay? That it was
yeah,
Kurtzman and Akiva that came up with the first pitch that Patrick Stewart hated. So, excuse me. He said that. The first pitch that they did together, Patrick Stewart hated and he flat out rejected. It was Shaban's second pitch that got him in, and then they discarded it. They threw
right,
away Shaban's pitch that actually got Stewart to do the role. So
yeah.
there's that. Okay, there is that.
Well, and I'm sitting here and I'm going through Akiva Goldsman's credits, and it's oh man, I mean he's got things like A Beautiful Mind, the Will Smith I, Robot movie, which I kind of like, some good stuff in here, but then he's also got stuff like Transformers Last Night, Batman and Robin, that recent Dark Tower movie,
Oh man.
but then apparently he wrote the short track that Children of Mars that I kind of liked. Um, and it goes back to this whole thing. I was so excited, and he's one of the producers apparently behind Mindhunter, and I love Mindhunter. That's such a great show. Um, um, I just look at this guy's credits. I don't don't get it. I mean, um I don't know. I don't know. But I know from having worked on projects, um, you're all excited about it, and you get paired with someone who you respect, who's worked on some things that you like, and in the midst of working on it, you realize that they don't know why something is good, or why something clicks with people. You know what I mean? Like that that what they like is the surface aspect of it. Because I think everyone involved with this likes the idea of Star Trek being an adventure in space, um, but a lot of them, well, as they've clearly stated, they don't like having to write within the confines of Gene's vision,
No,
because they feel
because it's
like
hard.
that.
Because it's
Yeah,
hard. It requires
yeah,
you to really think and figure out, how am I going to tell the story I want to tell within the confines of this already established world. And most Hollywood writers are so lazy, they don't want to do that. That's the bottom line.
right,
Because anybody who watches normal TV, sitcoms and all that kind of stuff, even drama, there are certain ideas that are constantly recycled all the time, you know,
right.
constantly. Because these aren't, if they were great writers, they'd be writing novels like Shaban, right?
Yeah,
That's what great writers do.
and I want to prop up Shaban because Unbelievable is really great. It's on Netflix. So, and that's a show that he helped co-create. Um, and but then there's just some real Russian roulette, stuff happening with some of this other stuff. Um, but he's been behind a lot of great things, and he's written some good stuff. But then there's some other stuff in here that's just like, wow. It was weird because I thought that I was looking into his IMDb credits because I was thinking there was something else that he actually had written, that it turns out he did not. Um, and I know some people liked Fringe, and he'd written several episodes of Fringe too. I don't know. I don't
Well,
know.
PJ says, Dave, you're absolutely right. He's got good stuff and bad stuff. It's hard to gauge him.
Yeah, it's just all over the place. Um, Speaking of all over the place, we should probably try to wrap this up. We're at over 3 hours.
Yeah, and I think we've kind of
So
gone deconstructed it. I mean, we hit all
yeah.
the main points of the story, and